Hello everyone. Today we're traveling in time again, but there's no glamour, no embroidered veil, no rice thrown at the end. You are getting married in the Middle Ages. And no, that isn't an invitation to a party. It's more of a life sentence, signed by a priest, sealed with a piece of stale bread and witnessed by chickens. Forget Pinterest. Forget my big day. In the Middle Ages, marriage wasn't a choice. It was logistics. It was like trading livestock, only with less emotion. And you? Well, you are the merchandise. It doesn't matter if you're 12 or 40. If you love someone else, or if you'd rather pursue a solo career as an eccentric monk. What matters is uniting families, joining plots of land, or ensuring someone inherits the throne, the stable, or that one skinny family cow. Before we continue, adjust your pillow, take a deep breath, and let the medieval reality envelop you like a wet wool blanket. And if this helps you doze off, do yourself a favor. Subscribe to the channel and comment where you're listening from. Maybe someone will answer, maybe not. The Middle Ages were like that too, full of expectation and very little delivery. Now, dim the lights. Let's begin this stable union with unhappiness. First thing you need to understand, love is not in the equation. Medieval marriage is like Excel, columns of dowries, rows of political alliances, and zero emotion. And if you were born a woman, you start with your luck already turned. Before you even learn to write your own name, which by the way wasn't a priority, your father is already negotiating your future with some other man, one who has a suspicious beard and 2 hectares of dry land. Actually, negotiating is a polite euphemism. The reality is, he's offering you as a promotional bonus in an agricultural transaction. And if the other side thinks the deal is fair, boom, wedding scheduled. If you're lucky, he has teeth. If you're unlucky, he breathes through an opening in his neck, but in the end, it was irrelevant. What mattered was keeping the blood noble, or at least keeping the lineage from dying of boredom. And if you were born a man, calm down. Don't think you got away with anything, because if, on one hand, you choose, on the other, what's really choosing is the debt. Marrying meant accepting the dowry. Sometimes a symbolic amount, sometimes the only cow in an entire village. And along with the bride came the obligations. Feed, protect, work, and pretend the decision made sense. Until death, or until the bubonic plague, whichever came first. Speaking of death, life expectancy was short, so marrying young wasn't just tradition, it was necessity. Girls at 12, boys at 14. Earlier than your high school, more confusing than your first crush. And nobody questioned it because, well, questioning got you jail time, or the stake, the ceremonies, no buffet, no dance floor, no engraved party favors. It was a quick mass, a sleepy priest, and a candle that insisted on going out. The groom in a sweaty tunic, the bride in a borrowed dress, sometimes inherited from the last one who survived childbirth. And you done. You're married. After the mass came the beginning of the martyrdom. Life as a couple started the same day, in the same room, with the same fleas. The house, if you can call it that, was a damp wooden cube with a thatched roof and a corner reserved for the goat. Sometimes there was a bed, sometimes just straw. But there was always the inevitable sound of snoring and heavy breathing, because privacy was a 20th century concept. The couple shared everything, space, work, illnesses, and every so often, a bit of uncomfortable silence. Because deep down, nobody had the energy for romance after harvesting all day and fighting rats for the last slice of bread. The first nights were marked by social expectation. That is, everyone expected the marriage to be consummated. And yes, sometimes the family watched or waited at the door in silence to ensure the mission was accomplished. That's not an exaggeration. It was proof of virility, proof of fertility, proof that everyone took tradition far too seriously. Yes, you could become village gossip if it didn't work. And then came the fun part, accusations of impotence, witchcraft, curses, or maybe a hex from an ex. The marriage was validated by the body. If the body failed, well, so did the marriage. But wait, it gets worse, because right after the wedding came the biggest unwritten contract in medieval history, the obligation to give birth. And give birth a lot. There was no Netflix, no Tinder, no hobbies. Just obligatory sex at 9-month intervals, hoping the child isn't born blue or cursed, or with the face of the bishop, which always started rumors. You didn't want many children, but you needed them, because infant mortality was practically a certainty. For every 5 born, 3 became a statistic before age 5. So having 10 children was really just ensuring that at least 2 survived to continue the lineage, or take care of you when your back turned into a permanent curve. Only nobody warned you that giving birth back then was a solo event. No hospital, no nurse, no anesthesia, just midwives with calloused hands, boiling rags, and desperate prayers. That is, when the house chicken didn't invade the room in the middle of the process. And if you died, well, too bad. The widower would marry again in 2 months, because emotionally nobody got over anything. They just replaced it. And before you think about running away, remember, divorce was a sin, literally. The only official way out was death, or an annulment for absurd reasons, like discovering your spouse was your 8th cousin, and even then only with the church's permission, which between one bonfire and the next had little patience for people with marital doubts. In other words, getting married was like signing a contract with boredom, poverty, and a urinary tract infection. And the worst part? There was no choice. It was this, or become a nun or a servant until you died. And now that you understand the basics, let's continue. Because the medieval marriage has begun, and it's already bad. After the wedding, nobody expected flowers, poems, or romantic surprises. In fact, the biggest surprise was waking up with all your fingers still attached and the bread not yet stolen by the dog. Because if there was one word that defined life as a couple in the Middle Ages, it was this: functional, in the worst possible sense. You and your spouse wake up early, always. There's no 5 more minutes, no snooze button. The medieval alarm clock is a combination of a chicken, your father-in-law's cough, and back pain. The first conversation of the day is usually something like, "The straw is damp again," or "The rat is back." Romance here is surviving the night without a splinter in your backside, and the day begins. For you, if you're a woman, this means moving from the straw directly to domestic work, which isn't domestic in the modern sense, like wiping a counter while listening to a podcast. It's more like washing clothes in a frozen river, carrying buckets of water on your head, and boiling everything in a cauldron that gives you second-degree burns just from the steam. All this while holding one child on your hip, another at your feet, and trying not to cry on the inside. If you're a man, the script is different, but no less tragic. You grab an improvised tool, a slightly bent wooden hoe or a borrowed plow, and head to the fields, to work the feudal lord's land, meaning to sweat for something you will never own. You return at the end of the day with your spine bent and the same piece of bread you left with. If the goat didn't eat it, communication between the couple is scarce. After all, the whole day is work, and when night falls, you're more dead than the pig from the last banquet. Sometimes there's an exchange of words like, "Is there pottage?" "Yes, it's in the pot. Watch out for the new fungus." Yes, there was complicity, but it was a complicity based on collective exhaustion, like 2 soldiers surviving the same war, but without the courage to comment on what they saw in the trench. And what about affection, intimacy, passion? Short answer, there wasn't any. Long answer, there was physical contact, yes. But between one bath and the next, meaning one per season, touch was always a dubious sensory experience. The skin was rough, the smell a symphony of sweat, mold, and pork fat. And yet there were expectations of conjugal duty. Sex was considered a religious obligation. Yes, religious. The church said the couple must unite, but only to procreate. No fun, no creativity. Single position, lights out. Not that you had them. No strange noises, and with guilt built right in. Because, of course, any pleasure was a sign that Satan was peeking through the keyhole, and if she wasn't in the mood, too bad. Saying no to your husband could become a court case. Because, of course, in an era when no one knew where their body odor ended and the house's odor began, the real problem was the woman not wanting to lie down with a man who smelled like sweaty cheese. The man could disappear into the fields for days, return covered in mud, and demand his conjugal right, as if it were a tax. If she refused, she was accused of being a bad wife. Or worse, a bad Christian. Spoiler. The judgment did not involve listening to her side. Now let's talk about hygiene, or rather the lack of it, which was also a fixed component of the marriage. The couple shared everything, including the fleas. Scratching at the same time even became a routine of affection. Scratch my back right here could be flirting as much as a cry for help. The bed, always the same one, was a democratic space for humans, animals, and unwanted visitors. Rats, for example, didn't ask permission, they just showed up. Sometimes they'd lie down between you two. Sometimes they'd take the morning's bread, but nobody cared much. Sleep was more urgent. And how to keep the house minimally functional, with disproportionate effort and non-existent resources. The pots were passed down from generation to generation, with the grime included. Utensils were improvised. A bone spoon, a dull knife, a plate made of old wood or a piece of board. And since there was no sink, what was left over went onto the floor, into the straw, or to the dog. Sometimes all three. Conflicts, of course, existed, but couples therapy wasn't an option. The medieval solution was more direct. Ignore it or pray. Or in extreme cases, resort to the local priest, who basically said, accept it, it hurts less, and sent you to pray 3 Hail Marys and stop complaining. Some marriages ended badly, others worse. Domestic violence was normalized, accepted. In some regions, the man had the right of correction. Read, he could hit you, and the woman could pray or die, because reporting it didn't exist. And if it did, the priest would side with the aggressor. After all, he was the head of the household. And you were just part of the inventory. And if a couple separated without the church's permission, public punishment, a fine, humiliation in the town square. One of them might be forced to walk around with a symbol of adultery or disobedience, like a ridiculous hat, or in cases of great scandal, a painted donkey. Yes, the Middle Ages invented cancellation, just analog. Even with all this, some couples lasted, not out of love, but lack of options. And they raised children, cultivated the land, shared a bowl of thin pottage, and sighed together before sleeping. The sigh wasn't romantic. It was just air leaving a tired body. And so the years passed, a cycle of work, tasteless food, unwilling sex, and badly slept nights, until one of them died and the other married again, because the cycle never stopped. It just restarted with another face, another smell, another piece of bread. Love could happen, but it was rare. And when it did, it was more like a brief pause in the suffering than a constant feeling. So yes, in the Middle Ages, getting married was a long-term plan for enduring boredom until death. And you're just at the beginning. After getting married and pretending everything is fine, comes the next inevitable chapter of medieval married life: children. Because in the Middle Ages, the family health plan was simple: have as many children as possible and pray that at least 2 make it to adulthood with all their limbs in place. You don't plan to have children, you just get pregnant repeatedly. There's no birth control, no dialogue about being ready. There's just the natural rhythm of the biological calendar and the religious expectation that you multiply like rabbits. The difference is, rabbits had more comfort. And when you get pregnant, congratulations. Now begins a 9-month journey of back pain, nausea, manual labor, and zero rest. There's no maternity leave, no comfortable chair. You continue washing clothes, taking care of the other kids, heating food in the cauldron, and trying to ignore the constant feeling of carrying a brick in your uterus. The neighborhood doesn't help. They just show up to say things like, "It's going to be a boy. Look at that pointy belly," or "Don't eat turnips, it gives the baby colic." Medicine, a combination of superstitions, folk healers, and fervent prayers to Saint Margaret, the patron saint of desperate pregnant women. And then the birth. You think you know pain. Wait until you try to give birth on a pile of straw with 2 midwives at your side, a chicken staring at you from the corner, and your husband outside trying not to vomit from nerves or hunger. There's no hospital, no analgesia, no privacy. You scream or try to, but exhaustion wins first. The midwife yells back. Someone throws boiling water into the wrong basin. The candle goes out. The baby slips. The placenta takes too long. The prayers begin. And if you survive, you are immediately promoted to multitasking mother. If not, well, then your husband marries your cousin, who's already been engaged for 3 weeks. With the baby in your arms, your pelvis still traumatized, the second part of the challenge begins, keeping the new human alive. The cradle, a straw basket, the diapers, reusable cloth washed in well water, soap, a concept not yet developed. Every time the child sneezes, you panic, because you know that anything could be the end. A fever, diarrhea, a misinterpreted cold draft. Infant mortality is so common, nobody makes a layette. You wait for the child to pass the high probability of death stage before sewing their name on their clothes. And if you think you're going to sleep, no, you're not. Breastfeeding is a constant exercise in pain, exhaustion, and paranoia. The baby cries at night, during the day, in the middle of lunch, and at the exact moment you thought about closing your eyes for 2 seconds. Meanwhile, the husband sleeps, snores, wakes up, eats, and goes back to sleep. Over time, more children arrive, 1 per year if the body holds up, and if it doesn't hold up, they arrive anyway. The cycle doesn't respect fatigue, trauma, or logic. And suddenly you have 5 hungry mouths, 2 who are still nursing, 1 picking lice off his brother, and another who disappeared into the woods trying to catch a duck with his bare hands. The children's education, life teaches them. They learn early that the floor isn't a toy. It's a place to work. At 5, they're already helping in the fields. At 7, they know how to separate good grain from moldy grain. At 10, they can get married. Yes, married. While you're still trying to remember your own name between one feeding and the next. And don't think the medieval childhood was full of songs and fables. It was more about avoiding premature death by absurd causes. Biting a poisonous mushroom, falling into the well, being run over by a cart, catching measles in the next village. The options were vast. And how does the couple deal with so many children? However they can. The house gets smaller, the bread gets thinner, patience runs out before sunrise. Each new child is an equation. More work, less food, more worry. But also more chances that at least one of them will take care of you when your legs are locked up and your eyes are blinking slowly. Sometimes there's love, sometimes there's desperation. The relationship with the children oscillates between affection and discipline with a wooden rod. Because educating back then was synonymous with hitting them before the world hits harder. And still, the parents continue. The routine drags on, the days blur. Each season brings a different kind of affliction. In summer, thirst. In winter, hunger. In spring, disease. In autumn, funerals. And even if everyone survives, the joy is always moderate, because at any moment, everything can change. An invasion, a plague, a decree from the feudal lord, an accusation of witchcraft, an ill-timed rain that destroys the crops. The fragility of the medieval family is constant. Fear is the backdrop. And love, well, Love is an act of resistance, a way of carrying on, despite everything, a way of not going insane when your child coughs for 3 nights straight and all you have to offer is vinegar. Raising children in the Middle Ages wasn't beautiful, it was functional, it was work. It was, at times, unbearable, but it's what there was. And when they all finally sleep, for a few hours, you lie down on the straw with your body aching, the smell of sour baby, and the certainty that tomorrow it all starts again. With less energy, with more noise, with the same thin pottage, and the same feeling that life is a joke told by someone who forgot the punchline. Welcome to medieval motherhood. There's no tutorial, there's only survival. You got married, you had children. Congratulations. Now your new challenge is to stay alive, even while being exposed daily to a lethal combination of filth, coughing, and medical beliefs that seem drawn from a spiritual game of Russian roulette. Let's start with the basics, the couple's hygiene. Or in this case, the lack of it. Bathing is almost a religious event, only less frequent, maybe once a season. And even then, with guilt, because some believed that opening the pores with hot water was a formal invitation for demons to enter. Yes. In the Middle Ages, bathing was practically a satanic invocation ritual. You and your spouse wake up with sticky bodies, oily hair, and a personal fragrance that could be classified as a chemical weapon in modern times. The saddest part? Nobody notices. Everyone smells the same. And when someone passes by you, the most optimistic comment is, "Ah, it's light today. Brushing your teeth. How funny of you." The teeth are the first to give up on the marriage. By 30, you already have a smile worthy of a miniature cemetery. Holes, cavities, rotting teeth and gums that bleed just from the wind. Your breath is a mix of old onions and fermented cheese, and so is your partner's. But since medieval love is based on resignation, you just accept it and kiss with your nose pinched. If a toothache appears, the treatment is simple. Prayers and a rusty pair of pliers. Sometimes a swig of liquor. Sometimes just screaming. Because anesthesia didn't exist. And the dentist was the same guy who cut hair and sold pigeon blood as medicine. Now let's talk about the bath, if you can even call it that. You heat water in a cauldron, throw it in a bucket, get in with your body half naked, half resigned, and scrub yourself with a rag that has seen more bacteria than the kitchen cutting board. The soap is a block of fat and ashes that stings the skin and takes off more than it cleans. And since the couple usually shares the bath, you get into the water that has already been used. That's right, one after the other. Sometimes the order is husband, children, wife. Meaning, by the time it's your turn, the water is already brown, the soap is gone, and the rag is emotionally unavailable. After the bath, you dry off with the cloth that serves as a towel, a curtain, a blanket, and your mother-in-law's handkerchief. Hygiene here is a state of mind, or a running joke, and when the body gets sick, which happens frequently, the medieval treatment session begins. You feel a fever, cold sweats, chest pains, mysterious diarrhea. What do? Call the healer. He shows up with a special kit, leeches, garlic, a crow's feather, and a vial of something that stinks like a dead goat. The diagnosis: your humors are unbalanced. The treatment: bloodletting. Literally cutting your skin and letting the blood flow out because, according to them, this balances the body. If that doesn't work, you drink a tea made from herbs that grow behind the cemetery, or drink blessed cow urine, or pray until you pass out. Any improvement is considered a miracle. Any worsening, divine punishment. And if the illness persists, someone will suggest it's a curse. Yes, the marriage can also be afflicted by dark forces. The mother-in-law coughed 3 times in a row. Witchcraft. The milk soured before noon. A hex. The husband lost his sexual appetite, an evil spirit, and off you go, looking for the folk healer who lives on the edge of the woods, smells like smoke, and has one eye that seems to look into the past. She performs a ritual with an egg, a sprig of rue, and a bent candle. She says the couple needs to sleep with a handful of salt under the bed and avoid red meat for 3 days. You follow the ritual. You don't get better. But the medieval placebo is strong. You believe, you hug each other with disgust, and you move on. And the fear of the plague, constant. At any moment, someone in the village starts sneezing, then coughing, then falling. And in 2 days, half the village is lying down, trembling, their skin stained. You and your spouse look at each other in silence because there's nothing to be done. Just wait or flee. But fleeing is useless. The disease is already in the air, in the water, in the bread, in the rat that sleeps in your bed. If one of you gets sick, the other takes over everything. House, children, work, prayers, premature burial. And if both of you get sick, well, the 7-year-old children will have to try to keep everything running. Because the medieval childhood has its own hell, but that's for another time. And the cruelest part, even when you survive the diseases, the body is never the same. You spend your life dealing with the after effects, chronic back pain, burn scars, warts that seem to have a life of their own, eyes opaque from permanent conjunctivitis. The smell of infection is part of the air in the house. And still, life goes on. You still wake up early, work all day, eat the same lumpy porridge, and lie down next to someone equally exhausted, with both bodies stinking and snoring in stereo. But curiously, there's something beautiful in that. A strange kind of intimacy, surviving together, sharing diseases, body heat, flea bites, and the fear of the end. A love that isn't spoken. It's only scratched, blown on, carried. In the Middle Ages, hygiene was a concept under development. Disease, an inevitable companion. And marriage, well, a mutual support society in daily tragedy. You barely survived the night, coughing along with your husband, shooing 3 rats from the bed, wiping yourself with the rag you call a bath, and your body still throbs from the last bloodletting that was supposed to cure you. But you still have to go out. Because in the Middle Ages, social isolation wasn't a choice. It was a sign of witchcraft. Which means that even stinking of vinegar and ancestral sweat, you throw some cloth on your body, tie up your hair if you're lucky, and go into the street, not for a stroll, but to be seen. Because disappearing for 2 days straight already starts a rumor, and so begins your journey through medieval social life, tired, smelly, judged, just like everyone else. The first point of contact with civilization is the well, the place where you get water and distribute judgment. You wait your turn in line, which of course no one respects, holding the bucket in one hand and your resentment in the other. The woman in front, old Aldegunda, strikes up a conversation with that tone that starts as a compliment and ends as an accusation. Your hair looks different. Are you making nettle root tea? My cousin used to, until her horse died. You smile with the corner of your mouth and wait your turn. The well is a social minefield. If you talk too much, you're a gossip. If you say nothing, you're a snob. If you get water early, you have secrets. If you get it late, you're up to something. The water doesn't always come out clean, but the social poison is always ready. The second stage of human interaction is the market. A cluster of crooked stalls, confusing smells, and sounds of shouting mixed with nervous laughter. Here you negotiate for food, listen to rumors, and re-evaluate your life choices. You arrive with a few coins in a cloth and leave with stale bread, 2 cracked eggs, a suspicion of an affair between the baker and the tailor's daughter, and a mild accusation that your husband is looking too pale for my liking. The market is the social media of the Middle Ages, only without filters and with the smell of old fish. But nothing compares to the main event of the week, Mass. You go because you have to, because everyone goes. Because not going is basically asking to be excommunicated or worse, noticed. In the church, you sit as straight as possible on a bench, as hard as your reality, trying not to cough, or they'll think you're possessed. Not to yawn, because that's laziness, a sin. and not to snore, which has happened. The priest preaches in Latin. You understand 3 words: guilt, hell, and flesh. All 3 summarize your week. During Mass, the game of appearances is intense. Women adjust their veils. Men whisper promises they won't keep. Children kick each other. And the priest watches it all with that look of someone who has direct access to heaven, or at least to the feudal lord. But the real show happens when the collective goes into witch hunt mode. Someone gets sick, the harvest fails, the bread molds, and boom. The village needs an explanation, not a rational one, but an emotional one, always. And that's when the rumors start. It was the tanner's wife. She's been too quiet. The midwife's daughter picked rue at the wrong hour. That black cat is hanging around the seamstress's house again. In a short time, suspicion becomes certainty. Certainty becomes accusation. And accusation becomes a spectacle, complete with interrogation, public humiliation, and maybe, just maybe, a symbolic execution, like shaving her head or forcing her to carry a bucket of feces through the village while reciting the Lord's Prayer. You watch in silence, with a shamed sense of relief. At least it's not me, yet. And because misery loves company, sometimes there's a party. A party in the Middle Ages is a temporary interval between one collective breakdown and the next, usually linked to a saint nobody knows, but who serves as an excuse to dance, eat badly, and drink worse. You put on your least-stained cloth, fix your hair with saliva and hope, and head to the square. There's music, made with instruments that look like torture devices. Circular dancing that ends in blisters, and watery wine that tastes more like expired grape juice mixed with well water. But for a few minutes, you forget. You smile. You shrug your shoulders. You realize your body, even in pain, still wants to live, even if it doesn't understand why. And when the music stops, it all comes back. You go home, hungry, guilty, and with a slight suspicion that you'll wake up with a scratchy throat, which of course could be the plague, or a curse, or just another normal day. Medieval social life gives you no rest and no choice. You participate because you have to, and you survive because you adapt, learning to smile with little, to be silent with fear, and to dance with both feet in the mud and your soul on the edge. Yes, you have friends, or something like them. People who offer you a turnip when they have extra, who hold your child while you wash clothes, who gossip kindly, but who, deep down, are also capable of pointing you out at a symbolic bonfire if the crops go bad. This is the village. These are your people, and this is your life. Now, after washing your clothes with ash soap, enduring the neighbor's insinuations, and pretending you understood the Mass in Latin, you go home. You think about lying down for a bit, closing your eyes for 5 minutes, but then you remember that tomorrow is a day to render service to the feudal lord. And rendering service is the medieval expression for working for free, smiling without asking questions. In the Middle Ages, you don't own your land, or your time, or your harvest if you think about it. You plant, you reap, you clean, you dry, you bundle, and you stack with an aching back. But part of what you harvested goes straight to the Lord's granary, and you hand it over, not out of respect, but because not handing it over means physical public punishment. You were born a peasant, and you will die a peasant. And between one and the other, you will spend your entire life serving a man you see once a month, mounted on a horse, wearing clothes that seem to shine from a distance, and speaking as if he has rocks in his mouth. He passes by, points at something random, a corral, a crooked fence, a child breathing too loudly, and says something like, "This must be resolved." And boom, you get a new task. The work for the Lord has no logic. One day you have to dig ditches around the pasture to stop rebellious goats. The next, you have to clean the riverbanks to please the water gods, even if no one remembers those gods' names. There are also the days he decides to build something, a wall, a bridge, a new barn. And everyone is summoned, not with a salary, but with the vague promise of protection, which never comes when the wolf appears or when the village accidentally catches fire. You work with a hoe, a shovel, your hands, no gloves, no boots, no minimum of ergonomics, and when it hurts, and it always hurts, you hear, "Pain is a sign of virtue." It's practically a prayer now. You repeat it mentally while carrying wet stones, mud up to your ankles and ants on your shins. The feudal lord, of course, watches from a distance. Sometimes he even offers praise, "You're doing well." And then he goes inside and disappears for 3 days because he had a headache and needs to rest. There are also the tributes. Because besides the physical labor, there's the mandatory contribution, part of your harvest, part of your chicken raising, if any survive the neighbor's dogs, and even your tallow candles, which barely light the inside of your house, but now must light the castle hall. You give all this without knowing exactly why. You just know you always have to give a little more. If the harvest was good, great, he gets extra. If it was bad, you hand over the little you have and eat turnip peels until the next full moon. And the most ironic part, if hunger hits hard, you can still be punished for not organizing yourself properly. Because the blame is never the weather, nor the rats, nor the system. The blame is always yours. Sometimes the feudal lord calls the village for a collective audience. He climbs onto an improvised platform with the air of a king and begins a speech. He talks about the importance of order, of faith, of hard work, and you listen to it all with a crooked spine, holding one child on your hip, another hanging off your shoulder, and a third one busy licking a rock. At the end of the speech, he hands out vague promises and 1 or 2 coins for the most dedicated servants, who you've never actually seen receive anything. But everyone claps, because faking enthusiasm is another form of survival. If anyone dares to ask a question, something simple like, "But will we have access to clean water this month?" there's a silence. Then a polite answer that says everything and nothing at the same time. Something like, "Those who have faith do not need explanations." The phrase becomes a legend in the village. You hear it again 3 days later, spoken by the cobbler, when he refuses to mend your shoe with old leather. There are also the special collection days, when the Lord's messengers go from house to house asking for a little extra: firewood, cloth, even dried mud. They say it's for an important construction project, a sacred barn, a new watchtower, or remodeling the castle's party hall, which is looking too modest for noble visitors. You hand over the little you have, not because you want to, but because saying no is signing your own sentence, weeks of pulling a cart as punishment. Even favors are a problem. If a Lord's soldier helps rescue your cow stuck in the mud, days later you'll be charged with voluntary work in the stable. If the castellan lends you a hoe, you must, in return, fix the stakes in his garden. The logic is simple. Everything that looks like help is actually debt, and everything that is an obligation is also debt, with interest, and still you carry on. You work because you must. You pray because it's all that's left. You smile at the overseer because you know a wrong look can turn into a beating. You get used to it. You learn to calculate how much energy to spend so you don't collapse before the end of the shift, but also without looking lazy. You learn to feign gratitude while counting how many stones are left to pile. And you learn, above all, that dreaming of change is a luxury that no one here can afford. The feudal lord isn't a soap opera villain. He's just part of the scenery. A constant reminder that you were born into a structure where freedom is a beautiful but distant concept. Almost like taking a bath twice in the same week. It just doesn't happen. And when night falls, after another day of sweat, pain, and silence, you return home with your body in pieces and your mind numb. The dinner is always the same. The exhaustion too. And tomorrow it all starts again. Because in the Middle Ages, the only certainty you have is that there will be work. Always. With sun, with rain, with plague, or with pests, work until your body gives up, and be grateful, because after all, at least today, it wasn't you who was summoned to clean the castle latrine. You wake up. Or rather, you're dragged from the straw bed by a child screaming that they're hungry. Which is ironic, because everyone is hungry all the time since birth. Eating in the Middle Ages isn't pleasure. It's resistance, an act of faith, luck, and sometimes self-deception. Breakfast, if you can call it that, consists of a piece of dark bread, hard as a brick. It doesn't come sliced or soft, and it certainly wasn't made today or yesterday. It has already passed through several stages of its useful life and is now in the blunt weapon phase. You dip the bread in lukewarm water, pray you don't break a tooth, and chew slowly, not for pleasure but because you have no choice. Sometimes there's leftover porridge, a grey mixture of barley, water, and guilt. The porridge is served warm when there's time, or cold when you're late. It tastes like nothing, with an echo, but it's filling, and that's already a victory. Throughout the day, the diet continues at this tedious pace. Lunch is an elastic concept. It might happen in the middle of the day, or be skipped entirely. It depends on the work, the weather, and the mood of the chicken that didn't lay an egg. When it does happen, the star of the menu is the pottage. A stew that starts cooking on Monday and is fed with suspicious ingredients until Saturday. In it, you'll find old cabbage, deformed turnips, dried grains, chicken bones, and a generous dash of hopelessness. The flavor of the pottage depends on the luck of what was left over at the market. Some days it seems like soup, others it seems like punishment. The texture varies between thick as mud and fluid as regret. You eat in silence, pretending everything is fine and trying to ignore the presence of a mysterious hair that definitely isn't from your head. Meat? Only on special occasions, like the wedding of someone very rich, and you eat what fell off the table. The death of a pig that was already half dead for days, or when the feudal lord decides to grace the village with scraps. And even in those cases, the meat is tough, fibrous, with a dubious smell. There's no refrigerator. Preservation is done with salt, smoke, and hope. You chew for long minutes trying to figure out if it was cow, goat, or another animal you'd rather not remember. Sometimes the meat comes with worms. Sometimes the worms are the meat. Either way, you eat. Because rejecting food is an offense to the effort of survival. There are days when the menu is even more exotic. Roots you dug up on the side of the road. Leaves that someone swore aren't poisonous. Mushrooms of dubious appearance, but that your uncle swears give you visions. And moldy bread that you scraped with a knife to make it more presentable. And speaking of bread, let's be clear. It's the center of the medieval diet. But don't be fooled. This bread doesn't have a crispy crust or a fluffy interior. It's dense, dark, heavy, and made with flours that vary between wheat, barley, and leftover grains that no one could identify. In times of crisis, meaning always, they even use sawdust. Yes, you heard right. Sawdust mixed with flour to make it last longer. The bread becomes an experiment in civil engineering. You eat 2 slices if you're lucky and hope that this time it doesn't bring more stomach aches than sustenance. Fruits are rare, and when they appear, you eat them knowing they won't last 2 days without rotting. Crooked apples, deformed pears, plums with worms. You ignore the insect, take a bite and feel grateful for tasting something sweet for the first time in weeks, even if it comes with a slight entomological crunch. As for milk, well, milk is treacherous. When fresh, it's great if you can get it before it sours. When it curdles, it becomes cheese. When it really curdles, it becomes legend. Some still use it anyway, mixed with honey and faith. It's a risk. But risking it is part of the medieval digestive process. And if you're thinking about sweets, forget it. Sugar is a luxury item, expensive, imported, castle stuff. The closest you get is honey, when someone has the courage to face a hive with a cloth over their face and a stick in their hand. So, For dessert, you might have nothing, or a piece of nothing, or a vague memory of a sweet you might have dreamed of once. Even at festivals, the food remains an upgraded version of misery. Instead of pottage with turnips, pottage with onions. Instead of dry bread, burnt bread. Instead of watery wine, even more watery wine, but with music. And that seems to be enough for some reason. And when you get sick, which, as we've seen, is common, there's a special diet, bone broth, or rather, hot water that tastes like bone. Sometimes a piece of garlic floats by, sometimes not. The logic is, the less chewing, the easier to swallow with a fever. If you're lucky, someone adds a piece of soaked bread. If not, you drink straight from the ladle and pray you don't vomit. Curiously, even with this unbalanced diet, you survive. Weak, but functional. The medieval body is a miracle of adaptation, accustomed to eating the same, chewing the minimum, and digesting the impossible. Your stomach rumbles more than your husband, and your intestines, well, your intestines deserve their own section. When the day ends, you sit in the corner of the house, sharing the last piece of bread with the children, and you realize that despite everything, no one died today from food poisoning. And around here, that's already a success. You lie down with your stomach half full, half uncertain, and think, maybe tomorrow there'll be something different, maybe a potato, maybe an egg, maybe just more pottage. But at least there's still something. And as long as there's something, you eat. Without taste, without rush, without expectations. In the Middle Ages, eating isn't pleasure. It's resistance, it's method, it's routine. And now, with your stomach rumbling or not, you close your eyes. Because tomorrow there's more. More bread, more porridge, more pottage. More of the same. But always hungry, always hopeful. After a full day of eating suspicious pottage, bread with the texture of tree bark, and cheese with a personality of its own, your body starts sending signals. Internal noises, a growing sense of urgency, an uncomfortable heat rising up your spine. It's the call of nature. Or, as they said around here, the moment to relieve the belly. But before we go on, it's good to adjust your expectations. There is no bathroom, there is no toilet, and certainly no toilet paper. There is at best a corner of the village that everyone pretends doesn't stink, and which curiously stinks more because of it. If you live in a simple house, which is practically guaranteed, your bathroom is an area behind the building. A sort of improvised ditch with a few planks, some leaves around it, and a smell that attacks you before you even arrive. You go there, holding your clothes with one hand, warding off flies with the other, and praying you don't slip. The ground is mud, wet, uneven. The wind blows by and carries the aromas as if it were a divine message that everything is wrong. You squat with difficulty, trying not to lose your balance, and do what you need to do. Not quickly, but not with contemplation either. It's an uncomfortable process, tense, and usually interrupted by some noise. A branch breaking, a dog barking, a child asking if you're done yet. Now the part that really matters, the cleanup. Paper? No. Soap? Never. What you have is a handful of dry straw, an old rag, or, if it's your lucky day, a large leaf that you pray isn't poison ivy. The process is fast. It has to be. Because the exposure is total, the risk of infection is high, and the embarrassment is constant. Some wealthier people have access to internal latrines, holes dug inside small rooms attached to the houses. A luxury, but still a luxury that stinks. These latrines accumulate waste for days, sometimes weeks, before being cleaned. And the cleaning is done by someone who gets paid coins for it, and who, for that very reason, is already considered half wizard, half cursed. If you're away from home, the situation gets worse. At the market, for example, there's no bathroom. You improvise behind barrels, bushes, or simply hold it until your bladder begs for mercy. And when diarrhea strikes, which happens frequently, there's no possible planning. It's a run for the open field, hoping not to be seen, and accepting that your dignity is going to stay there for a while. Ah yes, diarrhea, the faithful companion of the medieval diet. Caused by contaminated water, poorly cured meat, sour milk, moldy bread, and even the air, according to some theories of the time. It's not just a symptom, it's a lifestyle. And most of the time it's faced with herbal tea, a wet cloth on the forehead, and the hope that you'll last until the next lunar cycle. And when someone gets truly sick, there's a specific ritual. The person is isolated in a corner of the house, sometimes in a separate hut if there's space. The floor is lined with straw. A bucket is placed nearby, or not. And all that's left is to pray that the belly evil passes without taking the patient with it. The doctors, when they appear, recommend bloodletting. Because, of course, if you're weak, the best thing is to lose more blood. Or they suggest fumigation with herbs, or a diet based on boiled water with crumbs. It rarely works, but everyone pretends it does. And for the chronic cases, those people who live with their intestines in constant revolt, there are nicknames, bad jokes, and a mild but constant social exclusion. Because, after all, nobody wants to sit next to someone who might need to run at any moment. Even the odor starts to become part of the identity. You become the one who lives with a stomachache. A less than honorable title, but hard to shake. The most curious part is that this whole situation was seen as normal, because everyone went through it. The smell in the streets was common, the stains on clothes, expected. Digestive emergencies, part of daily life. If someone complained, they were considered weak, spoiled, or possessed. And in the middle of it all, there's you, trying to maintain some dignity, even with your intestines at war. Trying to pretend everything is under control, while holding your breath near the ditch. Trying to believe that one day, your body will just get used to it. Spoiler, a calm one, you can hear this. It won't. You end the day with your stomach rumbling and your intestines threatening. You lie down on the straw, hoping sleep comes before the cramps. You close your eyes and pray that no one has to run into the woods in the middle of the night. It's happened more than once. And there's no flashlight, just darkness, mud, and the sound of your own hurried footsteps. In the Middle Ages, even relieving yourself is an ordeal, a challenge of strength, patience, and physical balance. A constant reminder that living here is facing the basics daily as if it were a battle. And the most absurd part, you survive. With sensitive intestines, an offended stomach, and hygiene in deficit, but you survive. Because medieval resilience isn't in the sword, it's in the ability to stomach pottage and walk away afterward. You've barely recovered from the indigestible dinner, that pottage fermented with expired onions, and you already have to deal with another annoyance, your husband's silence. He came home late, smelling of wine and easy laughter, but since he crossed the threshold, he's only exchanged 3 words with you. 2 were grunts. The third was food. And you try not to think about it too much because thinking hurts, but it's impossible not to notice he's been different. A vacant stare, an unkempt beard, that way of someone hiding something. And it's not just the piece of meat that the castle cook might have accidentally dropped in his lap. It's something else, intuition, suspicion, and of course fear. Do you know what happens when you talk too much about this? A jealous woman is an uncontrolled woman. A woman who asks too many questions is a suspicious woman. And a suspicious woman around here is always guilty of something, of anything, even if no one knows exactly what, so you pretend you didn't see, that you didn't smell, that you didn't imagine him smiling more than usual at the baker's girl, who doesn't have a bakery but always has flour on her. You say goodnight. You adjust the thin blanket over both of you and hope sleep comes before the paranoia. It comes, but it's shallow, short, and full of strange images. You dream of bells, of shouting, of your name being whispered by the neighbors behind the well. The next day, the neighborhood is already commenting. A whisper here, a side eye there, and just like that, you're being watched. Not for what you did, but for what you might have felt. That's how it starts. Someone says you were looking too long at the midwife's son. Another swears they saw you too close while picking turnips. You don't even remember it. But it doesn't matter, it's history now. And your husband? Silence, worse than anger. He answers in monosyllables, looks at you sideways, pretends you're the wind, until the moment he explodes over something trivial. A spoon out of place, a sigh that's too loud, a piece of burnt bread, and he throws it in your face that he knows what's been going on. But he doesn't know. Neither do you. You just feel. And that's enough. Suddenly, you're being interrogated. Not by justice, but by daily life. Every move you make is watched. If you go to the well and take too long, it's because you stopped to flirt. If you come back quickly, it's because you're trying to hide it. If you answer back, you're insolent. If you stay silent, you're complicit. The marriage is now a minefield. You measure your words, control your tone of voice. You watch your own gestures as if they could betray you, because they can. And when someone does cheat, for real, not in people's heads but in real life, what happens? Depends. If it's the man, it's fine. The village comments, laughs a little and forgets. They say it's a man's thing. It was just a weakness. He was bored. But if it's you, the hole is different, literally, because women have been thrown in holes, in cells, in sacks, put on forced fasts, with bread and water, until they confess what they never did. You remember Joanna? The one accused of adultery just for laughing at a joke that wasn't her husband's. She spent 3 days tied to the post in the square, 3 nights of cold wind, sleepless. In the end, nobody knew if she had actually cheated, but nobody cared anymore either. She became Joanna the sinner, and her husband married again, to her cousin, who also laughs too much. You start to avoid looking people in the eye. You walk with your veil lower, you talk less, you smile almost never. Your husband's jealousy has become routine, and now even the children notice. They fall silent when he arrives. They avoid the corners where he passes, and you think this isn't a marriage anymore. It's a prison made of coarse linen, and the guilt, you feel it, even without knowing why. You feel it because they taught you that a woman must be discreet, that she must avoid attention, that male desire is natural, but yours is shameful. And Bree, that if he strays, it's because you failed to please him. That if he pulls away, the fault is yours, always yours. One of those afternoons, you're washing clothes in the river when you hear laughter. 2 young women commenting on the feudal lord and his nightly visits. One of them says, between giggles, "At least he gives a warning." The other replies, "That's more than most husbands do." You don't laugh, you don't take offense, you just feel a strange relief. As if for an instant the misery was shared. As if you were all in this ridiculous game of pretending not to see, not to know, not to feel. And this collective pretending, it's exhausting. When you get home, he's there, sitting, staring at the floor. You serve the pottage. He eats in silence, and you think, will this ever get better? But you don't think for long, because thinking too much around here is dangerous, so you lie down, in the dark, in the quiet, pretending your heart doesn't hurt, and you wait for sleep to erase another part of you, because in the Middle Ages, being a wife is disappearing slowly, without a scream, without a scandal, just with sighs that no one hears. You've already lost count of how many nights you've slept pretending not to hear your husband's snores, mixed with murmurs of names that aren't yours. Sometimes you wake up to him calling for Helena. No one knows who she is. Maybe an old lover. Maybe an illusion. Maybe someone who doesn't grumble when the bread is burnt. You swallow hard, turn on your side and think, is there any way out of this? And the answer arrives before the hope even forms. There isn't. Getting separated in the Middle Ages is a funny idea. Like flying or eating dinner in silence. It doesn't happen. The marriage is sacred, indissoluble, and especially if you're a woman, then it's a life sentence. With rights to stale bread and forced labor, you marry once, only once. It doesn't matter if he cheats on you, if he yells at you, if he ignores you. It doesn't even matter if he hits you. All that matters is that God heard you swear eternal love. And apparently, he writes everything down on parchment with no eraser. You've heard stories of women who tried. One asked for a separation because her husband was always drunk. She was called insubordinate. Another because he hadn't come home in months. She was accused of abandonment. Yes, she was accused. Because if the man leaves, the woman must wait. And if he never comes back, you just become a potential widow. It can last for decades. But patience is a female virtue, they say. The few who managed some kind of separation lived like ghosts. No right to a new union, no respect from the community, living on alms and side eyes. A separated woman was automatically a woman suspected of everything. Her morals, her faith, her composure. Which is ironic, since the missing husbands continued to live well, laughing, eating meat, and even marrying again, with special permission, of course. Because the system always finds a loophole, as long as you have a penis. If you consider running away, and you have a few times, the problems multiply. Fleeing is a crime. Even if it's to save your own life, you have no money, you have no property, you have nowhere to go. And if you manage to leave, someone will find you and bring you back. Like lost livestock. Some hide in convents, but a convent isn't liberation. It's just another kind of prison, with prayers, fasts, punishments, and mandatory silence. You trade the pain of an unhappy marriage for the perpetual silence of a cold cell, shared with 20 other women who also tried to run away from their own lives. Inside, everything smells like mold, incense, and resignation. The church, which rules everything, is clear. You married. Now you endure. There is only one possible loophole, annulment. But for that you need to prove the marriage was never valid, that there was no consummation, that there was deceit, heresy, witchcraft, or a reverse miracle. Simple things, you know? Of course, you have no way of proving any of this. The witness who could help you died of plague, or married someone else and doesn't want to get involved. And you, tired. Just take a deep breath and continue pretending that everything is normal. Even in the rare cases where the husband dies, from war, disease, or falling drunk into the well, freedom doesn't come with a party, because then you become a widow. And a widow in the Middle Ages is practically an entity. You can't laugh too much. You can't wear colors. You can't seem happy. If you do, someone will say you got over it too quickly. If you cry too much, they say you're faking it. You can never get it right. And worse, the entire village starts to mind your morals. They monitor who enters your house, how long you stay at the market. If the milkman smiled too much at you, it's a kind of freedom so closely watched that it feels more like disguised punishment. You sometimes hear stories of rare love. A couple who grew old together, who laughed at their own pains, who shared the last onion with tenderness. But you've never met one of them up close. You only heard tell. And always from someone who also never saw one. They became legends, like mermaids, or soft bread. The most common thing is to live what you live. Silence, routine, empty stares at dinner, and that constant feeling that if you could go back in time, you would have said no before you even knew his name. But now, it's done. And done is not an option. In the end, you understand. In the Middle Ages, marriage isn't a choice. It's destiny. Bitter, repetitive, poorly seasoned. Just like the pottage that you've been serving for 20 years. You serve. He eats. You clean. He snores. You turn on your side and pray to dream of some life where divorce and soap exist. And when you think too much, you try to remember good things. A child's smile, an unexpected hug from a neighbor, the time the sky turned orange, and for 1 second everything seemed beautiful. Small chances, small reminders that despite everything you still feel, you still dream, you still breathe, even if the world tells you it's pointless. You don't know if you're happy or just accepting. The truth is, no one asked. The decision was made by two men, your father and his father, between a mug of sour wine and an argument over how many chickens a daughter is worth. After that, the date was set, the dress was sewn, and you were informed with all the excitement of someone announcing the arrival of rain. It's your wedding, but also, it isn't. You don't love him. You don't even know him. You saw him once from a distance while he was pulling a pig by the ear and spitting on the ground. It was enough to understand that delicacy isn't his strong suit, but they say he has land, 3 plots, and a mule, which around here is practically the complete package. On the morning of the wedding, you wake up early, not because you want to, but because everyone wakes up early in the Middle Ages. Life begins before the sun and ends when the candle goes out. The preparation involves no makeup, no personalized playlist, no photographer. You are washed with cold water from the well, scrubbed with soap made of old fat, and combed with a wooden comb that rips out more hair than it detangles. The dress is simple, raw, a light-colored tunic tied with a cord. You don't choose the color, you don't choose the fabric, you don't even choose to get married. But still, you smile, because they told you, today is a happy day. A day. And when they repeat it that many times, you try to believe it. The ceremony happens in the church, with its packed earth floor and a priest who has already forgotten the couple's names before the blessing. You walk in, accompanied by your father, who stares straight ahead. He says nothing, he just hands you over, like someone handing over a sack of wheat. And then it begins. The priest speaks in Latin. You don't understand. Nobody understands. But everyone makes the sign of the cross as if they do. It's beautiful, maybe. But it's also strange. It's like being in a theater where the audience is dozing and the main actor is a cloud of incense. You say, I do. He says, I do. And done. Now it's official. You belong to another man, in public, before God, before the neighbors, before that old woman who only came to comment on the stale bread at the feast. After the ceremony, there's a party, if you can call it that. A table with bread, hard cheese, some mysterious meat and wine, diluted with water. People laugh, dance, make questionable jokes, and pinch your cheeks as if you were a child going to school. The groom, now husband, drinks a lot, laughs loudly, sings off-key. At one point he starts pounding the table saying, tonight he'll make an heir. You pretend not to hear. Smiling hurts, but you smile anyway. Later comes the final part, the wedding night. You don't know exactly what to expect. You know what you've heard, what the other women said, what the midwives whisper when they think no one is listening, but none of it prepares you. The room is cold, small. It smells like candles, wet wool, and fear. He comes in. He closes the door. You try to take a deep breath, but the air won't enter. Only the panic. It's not beautiful. It's not magical. It's nothing like the troubadours sing about. It's awkward, fast, painful. And then, silence. He rolls over. He sleeps. He snores. And you just lie there, staring at the wooden ceiling, wondering if this is what they call love. The next morning comes the inspection. Yes, because proving the marriage was consummated is important. Some families demand the stained sheets as proof. Others send an old woman to verify. You feel less like a person, more like an object under review. And even when it's all confirmed, you don't feel relief. You just feel shame. The kind that sticks to your skin and doesn't come off, even with a river bath. The following days are all the same. The title changes. Now you are wife. But life goes on. Wake up early, cook, clean, obey. And you try to remember what you did before, who you were before. But it's hard. It seems this new role comes with amnesia. The husband alternates between indifference and authority. Sometimes he calls you my woman with pride. Other times he ignores you for days. You learn to read his moods by the way he chews. If the bread makes too much noise in his mouth, it's a day for silence. And love? Ah, love. Maybe it will come. Maybe never. They say love comes with time. But around here, what comes with time is exhaustion. And the most you can manage to feel is tolerance. A lukewarm coexistence. No sparks, no poetry, with a lot of turnips. You get used to it, because you have to, because you have no choice, because everyone says, that's just how it is. And when everyone says it, you believe it, or you pretend to believe. The result is the same. Another day lived, another sigh held in. Sometimes in the middle of the night you wake up to the sound of distant laughter, laughter from other women, maybe younger, maybe freer, and for a second you dream of a different life, one where the I do was sincere, where the dress was a choice, where marriage was a meeting and not a sentence. But then the husband shifts in the bed, pushes you by accident, and you come back to reality, to the straw mattress, to the roof that leaks, to the future that was already decided for you, without consultation, without questions. Just a contract signed with bread, wine and resignation. And tomorrow there's more, because the medieval marriage is just that, a routine that smells like mold and tastes like renunciation, an eternal commitment to survival, without romance, without return, without end. The years pass, not quickly, not slowly, they just pass, as if each season is dragging the same days with the same noises, the same voices, the same pot boiling with something brown that was once, possibly, food. You wake up with pain. You don't know where it came from, you just know it's there, in your lower back, in your shoulder, in your soul. And the first thing you hear is the sound of your husband clearing his throat, as if he's been trying to swallow a frog for 20 years. He's still there, breathing next to you. Same way, same smell, same look, lost in nothing, while he chews the same bread as always, as if chewing is a kind of silent protest against existence. You try to remember the last time you really talked, a real conversation, with words that didn't involve, "Where's the knife?" The door won't close. Or there's a rat in the beans again. You can't remember. Maybe it never happened. Maybe your communication has always been this mute ballet between chores and sighs. The children grew up. Some left, others stayed. Some come back every now and then with vague news, dirty clothes and tired eyes. You smile, you hug, you serve food, and you try not to look surprised when they call you mother, as if that still makes sense. The house has shrunk. Or maybe you've just grown too large inside. Everything seems smaller now. The walls, the floor, the air, even the space between you and your husband seems measured to never ever touch. You sleep together, but separate. You share a roof, but not time. He spends his days between the garden, the tavern, and the chair. He talks to the dog more than he talks to you. And you, well, you keep busy. You wash, you sew, you sweep, you pray. And you wonder if this is it. If life is just this. If marriage is just this. Two people, waiting for time to pass without making too much noise. The neighbors comment that you're a lasting couple. What a blessing, they say. An example, they repeat. And you smile with your mouth, but inside you're screaming, because you know that lasting is not the same as living, that enduring is not the same as being happy. Sometimes at the market you see younger couples, holding hands, sincere laughter, stolen kisses between vegetable stalls, and for an instant you feel envy. Not of that teenage passion, but of that illusion, that hope that this time it will be different, that it will last with the shine, that time won't corrode everything with the patience of a moral termite. And the body? Ah, the body. The body doesn't respond anymore. The spine grinds, the knees protest, the hair once tied with a ribbon now just hangs loose, because you're tired, tired of fixing it, of decorating it, of looking like something you no longer feel. Even the mirror, which isn't a mirror, just a bowl of water, looks at you with pity. The desire is gone. if it was ever there. The bed has become just a place for mechanical rest. Sometimes he still tries something, a touch, an insinuation. But his body is tired too. It's a gesture more out of habit than want. You pretend to be asleep, he pretends to believe you, and everything continues. The arguments have faded, not out of peace, but exhaustion. Arguing takes effort. Yelling requires lung power, and no one there has that kind of energy to spare. The silence won. A thick silence that covers everything with a layer of emotional dust. Time passes. Birthdays become ordinary days. Names forget anniversaries. Dates get confused. You only remember the harvest, the full moon, the next plague that might come from the fields. The marriage is a calendar where every day is a grey Monday. And still you continue. Not for love, not for habit, but because, deep down, leaving was never an option. And now it wouldn't even cross your mind. You don't hate your husband, but you don't love him either. He's just there, like a wall, like old furniture, like the feeling of dampness that never goes away. A constant presence that no longer bothers you because the bother has become part of the environment. Some nights, you find yourself crying without a sound. You don't know why. Maybe fatigue, maybe longing for a life you never had. For a love that never arrived, for a freedom you didn't even know you wanted. And when the crying passes, you wipe your face on your tunic sleeve, turn on your side, and wait for sleep. Because tomorrow, it all starts again, the same, always the same. And in the end, that's what marriage becomes in the Middle Ages. A life contract with routine, a promise made before God and kept by sheer inertia. There's no romance, no epic, there's only continuity and passive resistance. You grow old with him, and one day, one of you will stop breathing and the other will continue for a little while longer, doing the same things, at the same times, with the same silence, and the village will say, they were a happy couple, but only you will know the truth. You no longer remember the last time you heard your name spoken with affection. He calls you woman, or more often, nothing. Sometimes a gesture with his head, a clearing of the throat in your direction. And you respond without thinking, as if you were a piece of furniture that learned to obey the sound of the wind. Time has passed over you without asking permission. He is stooped now, his eyes always half closed, as if the light of the world hurts. You, too. Your hands tremble, your steps drag, and sleep. Ah, sleep. It comes when it wants and leaves without warning. Sometimes in the middle of the afternoon, sometimes in the middle of your soup. The house is too quiet. The children are gone, or dead, or live far away. Too busy to remember where they came from. The ones who remain show up every now and then, in a hurry, hungry, with empty promises. I'll come back soon, Mother, with more time. You smile and nod, because complaining only pushes them further away. And you? Do you live? Or something like it. You still wash the clothes, you still cook, you still pray, but everything is slower. Everything takes twice the effort and half the reward. Even the beans boil more slowly, as if time has understood that you're at the end and decided to move at your pace. Aches have become companions. They wake up with you, walk with you, sleep beside you, along with the husband who breathes too loudly and snores as if his lungs are tired of functioning. You're used to the aches, to the snoring, to the lack of conversation. At this point, marriage is no longer coexistence. It's survival in tandem. What used to be fights has turned to silence. What used to be routine has become automatic habit. You serve his plate before yours, not out of kindness, but because it's always been that way, and to change now would be like moving the bed. Uncomfortable, strange, and pointless. Sometimes he forgets where the spoon is, asks where you put his hat. You answer without sarcasm, just with fatigue. He repeats old stories as if they're new, and you listen. You feign surprise, not for him, for you. Because faking it is less painful than saying you've heard it 30 times in 30 winters with 30 different versions. You forget too, words escape you, names get jumbled, and there are days you look out the window and don't recognize your own village. Did someone paint that wall? Did they cut down that tree? Or is it just time molding everything until you don't fit anymore? The marriage is now a diffuse reflection of everything it was and everything it never was. There are no more demands, no plans, no promises, just the habit. The habit of sharing the same roof, the same noises, the same exhaustion. He doesn't praise you, but he doesn't criticize either. He just looks sometimes with that vacant stare of someone who wants to say something and forgot what. You understand, because you feel the same. Sometimes in the middle of the night you wake up not knowing why. You look at the ceiling, listen to his breathing, and you think, what if he stops? The idea doesn't scare you like it used to. It just leaves you empty, as if something inevitable is lurking, and you just wish that when it comes, it's fast. The village festivities don't excite you anymore. Weddings, births, harvests, it all seems distant, like events from another life, from another person. You go sometimes, just to remember you still exist, but you come back with the feeling of being in a world that moved on without consulting you. The priest calls you faithful sister. The neighbor says she envies the longevity of your marriage, and you smile, because that's what's expected. A living widow, an old wife, an example of resignation. But inside, you wish you could have lived just one day without that label, just one. When someone asked what you wanted, when the marriage was a choice, when affection was light, and not an obligation that smells like mold. The husband gets sick. Of course, it happens. And now it's you who takes care of him. You make soup, change the rags, pray softly while holding his trembling hand, not for love, not anymore, but for memory, for the life you shared, for the story that no one will ever write. And when he finally sleeps, you just watch. The wrinkled face, the chest rising and falling, and you think, was this it? This was your life, this man, this bed, this house. Maybe it wasn't good, but it was what it was. And that is already more than many get. One day, inevitably, he doesn't wake up, and you feel it before you even open your eyes. You already know. The silence is different, deeper, more final. You get up, you put water on to boil, you put on the black cloth, and you start receiving people. The neighbors, the priest, the children, all saying he was lucky to have you. You smile, you thank them, you serve bread. At the end of the day, you're alone again. But now, with an absence that fills everything, a void that doesn't scream. It just weighs, and you sit, you look at the packed earth floor, and you wait, because now all that's left is to wait. You never imagined you'd stay alive this long. In truth, you never thought about it. Life was so much all at once, childbirth, lice, burnt bread, that stopping to think about later seemed like a luxury. But now, he's gone. For real. Not to the market, not to the tavern. He's gone to the final destination of every medieval husband, the shallow grave next to the chapel with the crooked cross and the tallow candle that won't light properly. And you remain. The village looks at you differently now, as if you're made of glass. A widow, a survivor, a woman, alone. Which is funny because you've been alone for years. Only now it's official, registered, recognized. Now you are the widow of Joachim. Even if your real name got lost between one market day and the next, in the first few days there's commotion, visits, moldy loaves of bread as a sign of respect, canned phrases, always the same. He's in a better place. He was a good husband. God willed it. You listen, you nod, you serve tea, and you hope they stop repeating that you're strong. You're not strong, you're just alive. The routine changes little. The pot is still on the fire, the clothes still need washing. The firewood carrying, only now there's no one to share the silences with, or the snores, or the end-of-day sighs. You sleep on the same side of the bed, not out of attachment, but because your body has molded to that space. To change now seems wrong, like moving the door or changing the direction of the stairs. Sometimes you forget he's gone. You say something out loud, expecting an answer. You ask him to get the basin. You scold the dog for being loud. Only later, you remember. And the silence answers, always the silence. The younger women treat you with exaggerated respect, as if old age is some kind of honorary title, won through suffering and nail fungus. The men avoid you. They look quickly, then look away. Because a woman without a man is always a risk. She might be available or cursed, or both. You become a discreet presence, a gentle shadow in the village. The children call you auntie. Some ask for your blessing, others just run. And you watch, with tired eyes, but still living. Freedom. It exists, but not in the way you imagined. You can sleep when you want. You can eat when you feel hungry. You can walk to the well without reporting to anyone. But all of it tastes like leftovers. As if freedom, at this stage of life, is just an interval between past obligations and the inevitable end. There is no romance. No one arrives offering flowers or reciting verses. In the Middle Ages, a widow doesn't become a princess. She becomes support, consolation, part of the inventory. At best, she's invited to live with one of her children, the same one who forgets his own birthday and thinks bread grows on walls. And when a suitor appears, because sometimes one does, the situation borders on comical. A sweaty widower, with too many teeth missing and too many children left over, who thinks marrying again is like changing a tunic. Fast, practical, no drama. You refuse, not out of pride, but out of laziness. The laziness of starting over, of repeating, of putting up with more snoring, more jealousy, more arguments about turnips and damp sheets. Your body is tired. Your affection has dried up. What's left, you want to keep. Time passes. The wrinkles deepen. The eyes cloud over. You still go to mass, sit in the same pew, sing without a voice. You still visit the market, haggle over a turnip, comment on the weather. But your speech has gotten quieter, your steps shorter, your world smaller. And at night, alone, you sometimes cry, but not for him, not for you, for everything, for the life that was, for the life that could have been, for the life that still remains. A lukewarm cry that doesn't shake you, it just trickles. You start to cling to small things, an old seashell, a piece of fabric that still smells like youth, a pot with a burnt bottom that no one else wants, because they are the only witnesses to what you were, to what you lived, even if no one else remembers. Death, it doesn't scare you now, it's just sitting there with you, waiting calmly, no rush, almost polite. It whispers in your ear sometimes, other times it just watches, but it never leaves, because deep down, you know, the marriage is over, but the story is still breathing, weak, almost silent, but breathing. And if one day someone were to ask you, and no one will, but if they did, if it was worth it, you might say yes, or no, or that it was what you could do with what you had. Because in the end, living was just that, a sequence of it was what was possible, and marrying in the Middle Ages was just a part of it. A long, repetitive, smelly part, but a part. And now, with the sun setting earlier and your body getting slower, you just wait for the next day to come, or not to come. It doesn't matter, because the only certainty left is that everything passes. You don't know how many winters have passed. The calendar was never your strong suit. And now, with your bones cracking at the slightest movement, the seasons just blur with your own body. The pain in your knee tells you when it's going to rain. The stiffness in your neck tells you it's Monday. And the sound of the bells only reminds you that you're alive, for now. You still wake up early, out of habit, not will. The sun isn't even up, and you're already sitting on the edge of the bed that creaks as much as you do. Trying to remember if you have something to do, or if you're just alive out of inertia. The marriage, the one that consumed decades of your life, has become a memory without details. You remember some scenes, some smells, a sigh or two, but the rest has turned into a moldy cloth in the drawer of your mind. You no longer feel anger nor affection, just that feeling of it was. You think sometimes that maybe it wasn't so bad. But then the memory of a childbirth on the dirt floor or a pot of thin soup puts you back in your place. It wasn't tragic, but it was a long absence of joy. And that is also tiring. The house is emptier. One of the children died of fever. The other got married and moved far away. The grandchildren show up every now and then. They run through the room. They scream. They make a mess. And you watch it all with a mixture of tenderness and exhaustion. You'd like to play with them. But the body doesn't obey. The mind can't keep up. So you smile, you nod your head, and you wait for them to run far away. The visits have dwindled. The older neighbors died. The younger ones don't really know you. You've become the old widow on the corner, a kind of secondary character in the village script. You appear rarely, speak even less, but you're there, like the well, like the church bell, like the rock that no one bothers to move from the path. The nights are long and cold. Sleep doesn't come easily. When it does, it's light, full of jumbled dreams, mixed up memories, voices that won't come back. You wake up in the middle of the night and just stare at the darkness, listening to the sounds of the house, waiting for the silence to get tired of being silent. You don't feel hungry like you used to. You eat out of obligation, chew with slowness. You don't taste much anymore, just texture. And sometimes, not even that. The bread seems made of dust. The soup of hot water and despondency. And still you eat because you must, because that's what one does. The faith that was once hope is now routine. You pray every day. The same words, the same requests, but with less certainty, not of God, but of yourself. Because deep down, you're not expecting a miracle, just company. The priest passes by every now and then, brings words of comfort, talks about eternity, about salvation, and you listen, you nod. And you think that eternity has already begun, and it's far too long. You talk to the objects, to the pot, to the broom, to the cat, who seems to understand more than most people. You say good morning to the fire and see you later to the wooden bench, and no one thinks it's strange, because no one sees the mirror. You don't look at it much anymore. The face that appears there doesn't seem like yours. It's a face from another time, from another woman, full of marks, of folds, of history. You wipe it with a cloth and go back to pretending you didn't see. Sometimes, at the market, someone younger asks you, "What was it like in your time?" And you think about answering. But how do you explain that your time was a mixture of work, pain, silence, and hard bread? So you just answer the basics. It was different. It was hard. It was what we had. They smile, they thank you, and they walk away, never knowing they just talked to someone who survived medieval marriage. And frankly, few victories are greater than that. You still dream every now and then. You dream of your youth, of your mother's voice, of a sunny day when no one fought. You dream of warm bread, of a bath without rushing, of a sincere laugh. And when you wake up, you stay there with your eyes closed for a while, trying to keep the dream alive, because the rest of the day is just repetition. You think sometimes that it could have been different, but then you remember that back then, nobody chose anything. You were just passed along, from an altar to a field, from childbirth to the stove, from mourning to another chore. There was no time to want, and now, at the end of the line, you realize that wanting is perhaps the greatest luxury of all, and the most dangerous too. You still feel, even if it's less, even if it's delayed, the wind on your face, the smell of the firewood, the taste of the rain, the sound of the laundry drying. They're small things that still make sense, that still say, you are here, and for now, that's enough. You don't know exactly when you started to disappear, not physically. The body is still here, insistent, heavy, stubborn, but it's slowly, like a piece of cloth fading in the sun. A name that people say less often, a face that no one looks at directly. You notice it when you go to the market and no one calls you by your name. Just auntie, grandma, mom. Or when conversations happen around you, as if you're not capable of hearing, or worse, of understanding. Deep down, it's not personal, it's just the cycle. You've seen it happen to other women who were once the center of the house, the street, the village, and then became just a shape with a shawl. And now, it's your turn to be the shape. You still wake up with the sunrise, even if you don't have much to do. The garden takes care of itself. The chickens peck without needing conversation. The morning bread can be just hot water and crumbs. No one else depends on it to live. Only you, out of habit. And habit, at this stage, is more company than utility. You spend hours watching the village move. From the window, the children running, the couples arguing, the animals being pulled from one side to the other, all so same, so familiar, but with new people. People who greet you with respect, but without connection. People who don't know that one day you were in their place. The loneliness is physical now. Before it was emotional, now it's spatial. The house seems bigger, more hollow. The sound echoes differently. When a bowl drops, the sound takes a long time to disappear, and you listen to it as if it were a scream. A reminder. You try to keep the routine, pray at the same times, walk the same paths, light the same candles, but it all tastes like rehearsal. As if you're acting out your own existence for an invisible audience. When the children appear, it's a party. Brief, but a party. They talk fast. They hug you as if the gesture could compensate for months without a visit. And they promise to be back soon. You believe them, because believing is what's left. They ask how you are, and you say, I'm fine. Of course, because no one wants the real answer, that you're tired, that you're confused, that you're waiting, without knowing for what. The world changes, slowly, but it changes. New rules, new faces in power, new gossip, and you try to keep up, but it all seems like another language. The words have changed meaning, the people have changed their ways, and you just stand and watch. The feeling is of being on a boat that left without you, and now, from the shore, all that's left are distant, noisy waves. You start to forget. First, the small things. Where you put the spoon, the name of the neighbor's daughter, the day of the week, then the medium things. What year is this? What did you eat yesterday? Did you wash the clothes? And finally, the big things. Why? Did you live all this? The memory escapes like wet soap. You try to hold it, but it slips. And sometimes it's not worth the effort of chasing it. The days blur, it rains, it's sunny, it's spring. You don't know. It doesn't matter. The body continues even without the rest. Like an old cart that still rolls because no one had the courage to take it apart. You talk to yourself. A lot. With the fire, with the bread, with the chair, not out of madness, but because the silence is heavy, and your voice, even weak, is still better than the void. Sometimes you dream of the past, but the dreams are jumbled. You confuse children with grandchildren, husband with brother, bed with field. When you wake up, you don't try to understand. You just breathe deep and feel grateful to have woken up, or not. Depends on the day. Death, well, she doesn't scare you anymore. She's close, sitting in the corner, like a visitor who's in no hurry. You know each other. You've seen plenty of people leave. Now it's just your turn to wait. But the wait is slow. Too slow. One day, while trying to light the fire, you forget how. You just stare at the twigs, the piece of flint, the bit of straw, and nothing happens. Not for lack of strength, but forgetfulness. And that's when you realize you're starting to disappear for real. It won't be with fanfare or pain. It will be like you lived, in silence, with resignation and the smell of smoke. One day at a time, one memory less, one step shorter, until the world finally forgets. But for now, you're still here, breathing, watching, waiting, being part of the scenery, invisible, yes, but alive. You don't know if today is Tuesday or Friday. It makes no difference. The village wakes up at the same rhythm, the roosters crow in the same tone, and you open your eyes the same way, slowly. As if waking up is a decision, not a consequence. You sit up, you stretch your legs, you wait for them to obey. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they lock up. Your whole body has become a silent lottery. Every movement could be a success or a warning that maybe this time it won't work. But it does, like it always does, for now. You walk through the house with care. As if it too could collapse. The floor groans, the wood yields, the roof drips in silence. Everything is on the edge, just like you. The pot is in its usual place. The fire takes a long time to catch. The bread is already stale from the morning, but none of this surprises you. Surprise, in fact, has become a rare commodity. You're not even startled by strange noises anymore. A rat running, a cat fighting, a branch breaking, all of it is just more sound in the background of the background. Of the background, you speak less. The words seem to cost too much. And why spend them? No one is listening, not the neighbors, not the children, not God, who, if he is listening, responds with the same silence your late husband used to when you asked if he was going to help with the children. You don't remember the last time you had a real conversation, with questions, answers, glances, pauses. Now, it's just stray phrases. Warnings, observations like, the wood is damp, or I think it's going to rain. And still, you're grateful for the silence, because it's better than the sound of death's cough knocking at the door. Sometimes you get the impression that the world forgot to bury you, like it was an administrative error of existence. Everyone else moved on, and you were left as a bonus. An extra, a postscript with no script. You look at the sky. You remember you used to be afraid of death. Today, you're more afraid of staying alive too long, because the body gets tired, but time gets more tired. It repeats, 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 like a child who knows no other game. You dream little, and when you do, you're not sure if it's a dream or a memory. Sometimes you see your husband's face, younger, less tired. Other times you see your children, small, running through the house without lice or fever. And when you wake up, it takes a while to know if that is still alive somewhere, or if it's already turned to dust. The truth is, everything turned to dust, just at different speeds. The village continues, the festivals continue, the diseases too. You don't participate in anything anymore, but you hear the sound of the bells, the processions, the shouts from the market. It all reaches you like a muffled echo, as if the world exists in the next room and you are the old woman no one invites. And that's okay, because you don't want to go either. Getting up is an effort. Listening is an effort. Smiling is an effort. And you've already made enough effort for a whole lifetime. Sometimes a child appears, a grandchild of some neighbor, looks at you with curiosity, asks you silly things. Did you see a dragon? Were you alive during the plague? What's it like to have lived so long? You laugh, not because you find it funny, but because the child finds it funny. And that's enough. You nod your head, make up some answer, and let them run away believing it. Because in the end, childhood is the only time worth preserving, and lying to a child is just a way of letting them dream a little longer. You clean the house with slowness, a wet rag in trembling hands, dust that returns to the same spot, and you insist, because the gesture is what matters. The result doesn't have much strength anymore. Food is now just anything warm, leftover rice, root broth, soaked bread. You eat little. You don't feel much hunger. But you feel you need to eat, even without wanting to. Survival is stubborn. more stubborn than the will. You count the days, or try to, but the numbers get jumbled. You just know it's been a long time, a very long time, too much time. And still, the day begins, and you begin with it, even without reason, even without destination, because the machine keeps going until it stops, and no one warns you when it's going to stop. No one knocks on the door. No one says, it's today. You just live until you don't live anymore. And now, at the end of this day, just like so many others, you lie down, with the same lumpy pillow, with the same scratchy blanket, and you close your eyes, not expecting dreams, not expecting death, just rest. You open your eyes and it takes a few seconds to remember where you are. The cracked mud wall, the crooked window, the towel, hanging. It all seems familiar, but it has no name, as if you're living inside an old dream. A place that was once yours, but now is just a backdrop. You try to get up, but the body doesn't obey with the same ease as before. The knee fails, the hand misses the support, the spine protests, and you breathe deep. One more morning, one more cycle, and still you get up, because no one else is going to do it for you. The silence is different now, more dense. It's not just the absence of sound. It's the presence of something you can't name. A void that occupies the air, the time, even your thoughts. You walk through the house as if you're waiting for someone, but you don't know who. Maybe they don't even exist. Sometimes you forget to eat. Other times, you eat twice. You lose objects, you lose words, you lose hours. Time no longer has shape. The days are like old rags, all the same color. With stains you stop trying to get out. The house smells like time, humidity, dust, memory. The wood creaks, as if it's talking to you, and you answer with your eyes, with a touch, sometimes even with an I know. Because deep down, you and the house have become the same thing. Fragile, crooked, insistent. You wonder if it still makes a difference being here, if anyone would miss you. And then you forget the question, like someone letting go of a balloon and losing sight of it. You walk little, you sit, watching the movement outside. The people keep going, they laugh, they fight. They carry baskets, and you watch like a silent audience, like a memory that still has eyes. Once a week, maybe, someone knocks on the door. A neighbor, a distant nephew, someone from the church. They come in, talk fast, ask how you are, and you answer with an empty smile, because telling the truth would be too much work. You surprise yourself by finding old letters, an embroidered handkerchief, a button from a shirt that was your husband's. Small things that survive better than people. You touch them, smell them, try to remember, but the memory escapes. You feel the emotion, but not the reason, like a song without lyrics. And still, you put it back, because somehow, that is still yours. Sometimes you talk out loud, ask questions to the void, scold the kettle for boiling too loud, say good night to the bench, laugh at a joke no one told, and no one answers. They don't need to. The world already left, and you stayed behind, a little out of stubbornness, a little due to a miscalculation by the universe. The body doesn't complain like it used to. Now it just yields. The fingers don't hold right. The vision fails. The sound arrives muffled. The hunger comes weak. The thirst forgotten. And the pain. The pain has spread so much, it's become scenery. It doesn't bother. It's just there. You try to remember a name, a place, a flavor, but everything seems like a badly told dream. Images out of focus, voices without faces, smells without origin. At night, the cold arrives early. You wrap yourself in the blanket and wait for sleep. But it too has become capricious. It comes and goes. And when it comes, it brings memories that maybe aren't even yours. Sometimes you see your husband, young, sometimes your mother, other times, someone who never existed. And when you wake up, you don't know if it was a dream, the past, or an invention. You no longer fear death. She's become a neighbor, kind, discreet. You feel her pass by from time to time, whisper, but she never forces. She's waiting for you to decide, and you haven't decided yet. Maybe you're waiting for something, a sign, a bird, a voice, or just the moment when breathing feels like too much effort. And so another day ends. You close your eyes, not like someone sleeping, but like someone turning off the light in an empty room. And you think, without really thinking, will I still wake up tomorrow? And you don't care about the answer. Today, when you wake up, you're not sure if you actually woke up. The light comes through the window in a strange way, as if it's tired too. Your eyes open slowly, and everything is slow, silent, too silent, more than usual. Not even the creaks of the wood greet you. You try to move, but the body hesitates, as if it's pondering if it's worth the effort. Your arms are heavy, your legs forget the path, and you just lie there, feeling your breath, faint, shallow, as if it's borrowed. You look at the wooden ceiling, the familiar cracks, the marks of time, and you think that maybe it's today, maybe it's now. The day the last link to the world comes loose, and everything turns to absolute silence. But you don't feel fear or urgency, just curiosity, like someone about to hear the end of a very long story that you've forgotten how it began. You close your eyes, open, close again. Everything is heavy, even blinking. Outside, life goes on. Someone is carrying firewood. A horse passes. A bell rings in the distance. Familiar sounds, but distant, as if they're in another dimension, a world to which you no longer belong. You try to remember your name. It doesn't come, and that's okay. The name served its purpose for a long time. Now, it's not needed anymore. You no longer feel like someone with an identity, just like a warm breeze trapped inside a tired body. No one is coming today, no visit, no grandchild, no neighbor with stale bread or gossip, and you understand, not out of malice, but because they forgot. The village is in a hurry. Their life is different, and you've become part of the scenery. In fact, you already suspected. If you disappear today, they might only notice in 2 or 3 days, when the smell of absence starts to bother. But for now, you're still here, between one sigh and the next, between wakefulness and the fade. The memory of the wedding comes like a confused flash. You see the chapel, the itchy clothes, the serious face of your husband, the priest's words. There's no emotion, just the record, like rewatching a play for which you've forgotten the lines. The life together has also become an archive, sad, lukewarm, bureaucratic, with too many children, too much hunger, nights too short. A shared existence, not out of love, but out of a lack of option. And now, alone, you realize. Maybe you never loved, maybe you just endured. You touch your fingers, they're cold, but you feel it. You still feel, which is almost surprising. You thought you had already turned to stone. The ceiling is still there, immobile. The same ceiling that covered you for decades. It saw birth, it saw sorrow, it saw laughter, a few. And now, it watches the last sigh, without saying anything, without falling, just watching. You try to sit up, you can't. The body refuses, so you accept. Lying down is the last task, and you're going to complete it. The blanket covers you up to the chin. Your face is pale, but peaceful, as if time has finally given you a truce. The cold doesn't bother you anymore, the hunger doesn't come, nor the thirst. Just the sound of your own heart, slowly, each beat, a goodbye. You close your eyes one more time, and you don't open them, but for a moment, everything comes back. A smell of cake, your mother's voice, the sunlight on a harvest day. A laugh, yours forgotten, a touch of a hand, a kiss on the cheek, small things, things that don't hurt. It's as if memory, before leaving, decided to hold one last parade. And then, nothing. The wind enters through the window. Light moves the curtain, touches your face, and is gone. The house falls silent. The world moves on. And you, well, you finally stopped waiting. No one notices right away. The house remains quiet, as it always was. The kettle doesn't boil. The door doesn't creak. The fire doesn't light. But nothing seems out of the ordinary, because, after all, for a long time, the routine there was just absence. A sequence of almost nothings. It's only on the third day, when the smell starts to escape from under the door, that someone decides to knock. 3 light taps, then silence. 2 more taps. No one answers. And then, with a certain embarrassment, they break it down. Because even medieval death needed to be confirmed by the noses of others. Inside, you are there, immobile, face serene, hands on your chest, eyes closed, like someone who got tired of seeing the same grey world for too long. The village gathers. The old ones whisper, "She was strong. She had a long life. She went in peace." Worn-out words, spoken by those who barely remembered your name, and who, deep down, are more worried about who will get the iron pot, or the patch of land where the onions grew in the summer. The ceremony is simple, like everything always was. A distracted priest reads the same verses as always. The children yawn, 1 or 2 cry, but no one knows exactly why. Maybe from the fear that one day it will be them. You are buried behind the chapel, in a corner where the weeds grow fast and no one clears them properly. A wooden cross with no name, just Widow of Joachim. Because in the end, not even death gave you back the right to be remembered as yourself. But honestly, it doesn't matter. You're not here anymore. The house stays empty for a while. Then someone occupies it. A distant cousin, perhaps. Or a new family with too many children and too little space. The curtain changes. The smell, too. But the floor, it still groans in the same places, as if it still remembers your steps. The garden turns to dry earth. The rocking chair disappears. The cat leaves. The pot remains. And one day, someone will ask who it belonged to. No one will know. With time, your story is erased, like all the others. No one remembers your face anymore, or your voice, or the day you got married, or how many children you had. Maybe someone will say you were good with herbs, or that you made a decent bread. Maybe they'll confuse your name. Maybe they'll confuse you with someone else. After all, who cares? In the Middle Ages, they only remember the saints, or the very creative sinners. You were neither, and that's why your life, your long, miserable conjugal journey, ends like this, with a shovel of dirt, with a dry comment, with an overcast afternoon, no soundtrack, no dramatic cut, just dust. But, strangely, that's liberating too, because for the first time, no one expects anything from you anymore. No child crying, no husband snoring, no priest preaching, no neighbor judging. Now, yes, you can truly rest. And if one day someone asks what it was like to marry in the Middle Ages, maybe someone will remember a tired woman who survived it all, who lived longer than expected. But the real answer would be, it was a test of endurance, long, pitiful, without a happy ending, but still a story. So, now that it's all over, you can close your eyes one more time, but this time, you don't have to open them, because marrying in the Middle Ages was a slow disaster. Living after it was just insistence, and dying, well, dying was just the last task on the list. The end, now, you can sleep. Good night, tired listener, and until the next one, sleep with a tired story.